love rock and roll. Put another dime in the jukebox, baby. I love rock and roll. Put another dime and dance with me. Ow! Okay, all right. It was on. I must admit, I was swept up with the music and I felt like singing. I hope that you feel like singing sometimes because it's therapeutic. It's a happy thing that you can do. You know, we don't sing the kingdom songs anymore. We can sing whatever we want and find joy and happiness in music. And I've been thinking I might do another video about some of the music that we have, those of us as cult survivors, ex-JW community, you know, some of the music that has resonated with us, some of the music that has inspired us, as well as movies as well. I want to talk about movies and music that have meaning to us after we have escaped the cult and the Jehovah's Witness mindset and gotten our freedom back. Now, here we are. It's part 5 of my Elder Recollections. And I got to tell you, I think I might be halfway. I think I might be halfway at this point with the things that I want to say about the time, the 10 years that I was an elder. There were so many things that happened, partly because we only had 3 or 4 elders for most of the time in the body that I was serving in Porterville, in the Mountain View congregation, and this would have been, you know, in the late 90s, early 2000s, and mid 2000s. But anyways, nevertheless, in this Elder Recollections Part 5 today, I wanted to talk about double standards, loopholes, and things of that nature. Now, first of all, the double standards would be, okay, if your daddy is an elder, or your granddaddy is an elder, or your uncle is an elder, then chances are, you know, if you wear a suit to the Kingdom Hall and you're not drooling, you know, and if you take a yellow pen and go real quick on your magazine every week, I mean, you could do that in 2 minutes, right? I knew people that did that. Well, you too can be made an elder whether you're really qualified for it or not. I've seen it happen, and it just blows my mind when that happens. We had an individual that was asked to come over to help us. We had 3 elders, and they asked for Dan. The circuit overseer asked Dan to come over and help us. He was in the next door congregation. Those brothers need help. Dan, come and help. So Dan comes over to help, and you know, you get a letter of introduction and a letter of recommendation if the person is formerly a servant or an elder when they come over. So we get this letter of introduction, and then we get a letter of recommendation for Dan, but one of the elders was not in favor of recommending him, and the other ones were. And that's an odd, the way it was worded was odd. It was one person abstained from voting, was how it was written in the letter of introduction. Here is the publisher cards for Brother Dan and his wife. We hope that he can continue to be an encouragement and serve in your congregation as an elder. We were in favor of recommending him to continue with one abstention. And so we were like, what does that mean, right? So we contact the other body, and they tell us that there was one of the elders, and he was of the anointed too, which, you know, carried weight to us. An anointed brother, older brother, was an elder in his previous congregation, voted to not recommend him. So we had to look long and hard at whether we were going to do this. Then when the circuit overseer got wind of it, he was very annoyed and said, well, I asked him to come over to help you brothers, and he's qualified, you know, just reappoint him. And ultimately, of course, we did. We were good little boys, and we went along with the, you know, the manager, the district manager for Watchtower, which is what COs are. They're just like a district manager for any other franchise. It could be Burger King, it could be Chili's, it could be, you know, any franchise that has a district manager that goes around to make sure that their people are in line. So we went along with that, and ultimately we almost had to delete Dan twice, and we spent many hours trying to shepherd this problem elder along. And that's another story, if I ever get to it at all. So there's lots of double standards. You know, if you're part of the Good Old Boy Network, there is quite an extensive Good Old Boy Network in place among Jehovah's Witness elders. There's no question of that. Every place that I ever traveled or that I ever went to had a Good Old Boy Network. I had many elders, longtime elders, traveling overseers talk about the Good Old Boy Network. One circuit overseer said one time over a meal after the assembly and a cocktail or two that half the elders that were serving really shouldn't even be in there because they were old and worn out or didn't really take their responsibility seriously, but, you know, we're shorthanded as it is, so, and then he just shrugged his shoulders. My former father-in-law, Bob, he also said that on many occasions. In fact, that's his MO. What Bob likes to do is he likes to go into a congregation with his 2 6-shooters out, and whenever he gets sent to another hall, he likes to go in and delete people, clean house, shake things up. He stays for a year or two, and then he moves again. And you know what's interesting is once he moves, he never even thinks about or talks or contacts these people that he was bosom buddies with for the year or two that he was there. And then he just moves on in a locust-like fashion to the next batch of poor publishers and poor elders that are going to get their butts swatted by the Terminator, Bob. Anyways, that's another story also. I'm sorry, I you know, have some personal feelings there. I'm going to let that go for a while. Okay, the biggest loophole. You've probably been thinking this. You're probably yelling at the screen. The biggest loophole is the Elders book, where it says, I'm not making this up, and I will include the reference in the description. First of all, it's easy to download the Elders book. It used to be the Flock book. Now it's the Shepherd book. The abbreviation is the KS10 because it came out in 2010. KS10, Shepherd, the Flock of God book, has a paragraph that says, if an elder comes to the body and admits that they have committed a gross sin, like pornea or whatever, if some time has passed or several years have passed, and, this is the kicker, if they have evidence of Jehovah's Holy Spirit, then in that case, they can just be given private counsel, and continue to serve with Jehovah's blessing. So, if you're scratching your head, if you're wondering about this, basically what it means is that you can go to a strip club or a hooker or, you know, your coworker, and you can have sex, whatever it is, and then as long as you hide it for 3 or so years, a few years, then you can come to the body and you can be all sad-faced, and they will forgive you, and the normal rules that apply to publishers do not apply to you in the Good Old Boys Club, because it would be an embarrassment. It would be a bad witness to Jehovah. So we're just going to sweep it under the rug, and we're going to let you continue to serve. Now, the reason that I bring up this loophole, because a lot of you already know about this. It actually happened on the body when I was a relatively new elder still. Now, I told you that that young fellow, Ron, and I got made elders the same time. I was 27, he was 28, I believe. And within a year or two, I'm going to say it was probably, we had been elders for about 2 years, I think. That's my recollection. One day there was a meeting called. I go to the midweek meeting. It was on Tuesday nights, and I get this tap on the shoulder from Sam, who was the presiding overseer. They didn't use the phrase Kobe at the time. That was soon to come. And Sam says, we're going to have a meeting after the meeting in the back, okay? That wasn't that unusual. We had lots and lots of those. So we go into the room, and here's Ronnie with his head down, looking very sad-faced. He should have been in sackcloth and ashes with some rips in his garments. But so then Sam opens with prayer, and Jim, who was, I found this out later, who was very, very good buddies, drinking buddies, and buddies with Ron. And he and Ron and I were the ones that DF'd that kid for smoking a marijuana cigarette in his backyard. Jim says, Brother Ron has something that he wants to tell the body. Very stern, very solemn. I should say solemn, not stern. Very solemn. Then Ronnie says, in this very low voice, prior to being made an elder, in fact, it was when I was engaged to my wife, we committed what we define as porneia. End of sentence. He's done. So it was very carefully worded. I didn't think about that at the time, but then later I thought about the wording. It was worded, my fiance, my soon-to-be wife and I at the time committed acts that are defined as porneia. Now, he said it that way because this way he could say, they fooled around, they had sex, they did whatever they did, it doesn't even matter, but they had fooled around, and there was no reason for us to ask any more questions. He didn't want any more questions, of course, and who could blame him? Of course, the poor publishers, the poor young brother or sister that falls into so-called porneia as defined by Wash Towel, they get asked a zillion and one extra questions like we've talked about. How many times and positions, and did you use protection and all that stuff. So, of course, Ron didn't get asked any of that. Then, okay, so we're all, it's kind of like you could have heard a pin drop in the room, right? It's very quiet. And then Sam, I believe it was Sam, flips to the elder book. It was in the flock book. It's still in the shepherd book. Flips to the elder book on that paragraph where it says that if you've had evidence of Jehovah's Holy Spirit, you can continue to serve. And I think a couple elders made a couple other comments, like, why didn't you admit to this sooner? Because when they appoint you as a ministerial servant, which he wasn't even at that point, so, I don't know, 5, 6, 8 years ago, however long he'd been married at this point. When they appoint you as a ministerial servant, they ask you, is there any reason why you can't serve or you shouldn't serve. When they appoint you an elder, they ask you that as well. Is there any reason why? And of course, and then they asked him, did that come to your mind? Did you think of your impropriety with your wife to be when you were asked those questions? And Ron sat there very stone-faced for a few seconds as he was no doubt calculating his response. And then he said, "It didn't come to my mind at the time, but it did come to my mind later." So bottom line, we had I don't know, the whole thing may have only taken 20 minutes. Maybe it was 30 minutes. Wasn't very long by elders meeting standards. If you know anything about how long these elders meetings are, good Lord, hours and hours. We had a 5-hour quarterly elders meeting one time. It was agony. I mean, our rear ends were literally numb. We had to get up and stretch a couple times, and they were still numb. So these meetings, you know, can go very long. This one did not, because everybody just wanted to get done with it. Now, I remember thinking at the time that was an odd, the whole thing was odd to me. This is why it stood out. This is why I'm relating it to you. Because, you know, the other publishers, they don't, you know, there is no get out of judicial committee card for them. There is no, you know, escaping that. In fact, if wrongdoing occurs, if there is a judicial committee, the Flock book and the Shepherd book, they both say, the Shepherd book says restrictions will be applied. Discipline will be given. In other words, you're not allowed to comment for a while. You're not allowed to, you know, to be on the school or, you know, whatever. Those are, you know, the most, especially the commenting one is the biggest one, the usual one. You're not allowed to auxiliary pioneer, whatever. So, for a while. So these things, of course, are just completely circumvented, and the good old boy club can stay intact. And so fine young Ronnie was able to avert that disaster. Of course, it was only 2 or 3 years after that ultimately he got disfellowshipped and ran off with another guy's, publisher's wife in the congregation. That's another story for another time if I tell it at all. You know, it really isn't that much elder related. It's just rotten related or weird related or whatever you want to call it. So there it is, Elder Recollections number 5. Number 6, I have a couple things in mind. We'll get to them when we get to them. In the meantime, as always, I like to listen to the feedback and the comments that you give. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the fantastic things that people are saying. My interview with Marcus, what a cool dude. It was so great to have that interview. You know, there's a lot of people are messaging me lately, and I'll be honest with you, I can't always message you back right away. I do get back to every person that messages me, but it takes time. A tip, if you want to message me, whether it's to say hi, whether it's to ask a question, whether it's to just kind of vent, those are the 3 main categories of all the many messages that I get. Please email it to me. YouTube messaging just flat out sucks. It's inconvenient, it's awkward and clumsy. That's my opinion. I think some people share that opinion. So if you're going to contact me, please do. I love it. You know, just be patient with me. Sometimes I need a week or so before I can get back to you, but I do get back to everyone. And please email me, JWStruggle@gmail.com. So if you could do that, that would be appreciated, and it would cut down on the YouTube inbox, which is such a hassle. I would like to say, so take care, strugglers. I will talk to you next time.
The order is rapidly fading, for the times they are a-changing.